All right, welcome everybody. So today we're doing a SaaS ransomware protection webinar. That's what we would like to talk about today. And we have invited some guests from Spin.AI who are building a really exciting new product around this. So welcome. Um, Renier, will you introduce yourself and let us know what you're doing at Spin?
Of course. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Renier Gratial, Solutions Engineer at Spin.AI. Here at Spin, we have an all-in-one SaaS security platform encompassing backup and recovery, ransomware detection and response, data loss and leak prevention and protection, as well as SaaS security posture management.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. All right. So, I am Stephen Smiley. I'm coming from ScaleSec. We're a cloud security consulting firm, and I'm joined today by Jack Ryan, my colleague. Jack.
Hey everyone, I work with Smiley. We work on all sorts of different cloud security problems, and I've been with ScaleSec for a couple years, just working on interesting solutions related to ransomware and things like this. Happy to talk to you today.
Okay. Cool. So Jack and I are coming from the world of we've dealt with a lot of ransomware preparation activities, especially particularly in the cloud. But one of the more like emerging fields is SaaS ransomware, right? So Jack and I have been doing this specifically around AWS and Azure and GCP things. But we're seeing more and more activity around, SaaS products that don't fit that exact mold. And so I'm excited to pick your brain here today, Renier, and see what's going on.
Looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Awesome. Um, the For our audience today, here are the key takeaways that we were looking to get out of today's webinar. Understanding SaaS ransomware behavior, right? How it differs from other types of ransomware. How do we approach designing effective defense strategies? And how can we prepare for recovery and resilience, right? These are kind of the key things that we are thinking about when it comes to preparing for ransomware. And so hopefully you'll gain some insights into these as well today. Jack, can we start off by reviewing just some fundamentals of ransomware? Can you take us through, like, what are you thinking about when you're approaching ransomware?
Yeah, when it comes to ransomware, it's not a new problem, so you really do have to just think about the fundamentals and having those really down solid. When it comes to the inventory, you're not going to properly secure and be able to recover your data if you don't know what that is and where it is. So fully understanding where is your data stored, types of data do you have, what's the criticality of that, who's responsible for securing it, and making sure everyone within your organization is kind of in agreement there. Make sure people don't go and do things like store data in systems that you don't control and you don't have a solution for.
Mm,
You really have to focus on what's critical because especially today, there's millions and millions of different services and solutions that you can use even just for basic data storage. You need to know what you need to prioritize, and that helps you make sure you're putting in the preventative controls and all the other things that do take more time in beyond your inventory.
In your experience,
Um,
Jack, like, how many organizations have a good inventory of their critical data? Like, is that a given?
Frankly, I've seen probably less than 5 or 10% of organizations that have it really solid. Uh, a lot of people are spending time, building solutions, and they don't get the chance to refocus on those fundamentals like that inventory.
What are the like? Why is that? Like, what's so challenging about that in the cloud?
I think just given there's hundreds or thousands of different SaaS services that people are using, there isn't often a tool that an enterprise has already adopted that can tell you where all that stuff is. A lot of solutions are based on what's in SharePoint and what's in your SMB file share and things like that. A
Mm,
lot of people just aren't thinking about what's in my SaaS environment.
mm.
I gotta step in there. I 100% agree. And the scariest part, and I use this analogy a lot, is you don't know what you don't know, and that's a scary thing, especially when you're in IT. So to have visibility over this is, I think, paramount to echo Jack's point.
Yeah. All right. So what's the second fundamental, Jack?
Yeah, so continuing on to backups, it's one of the most commonly parroted things about securing your data, but a lot of people aren't doing it correctly. Even the 3-2-1 backup strategy, have 3 copies of your data and 2 different types of file storage. Maybe that means one in the cloud and one on-prem these days, and have at least one off-site. Even that's not happening in a lot of organizations. So just plainly, the ability to recover from a ransomware event is often left to just one system, and those systems where an attacker understands it, it's very clearly a backup system that's going to be their first target to take offline or to destroy that data, and people just don't have another option.
Yeah. I know it's almost like a joke at this point that people are not testing restoration of their backups, right? Like people will get together at conferences and have a giggle over, oh, when's the last time you tested your backups, right? um, and then it's like we all walk away, and then somehow the organization still doesn't do it. What are you seeing, Renier, when it comes to backups?
It's exactly that. It's there's a fine line, right? Organizations, especially ones with lean IT teams, they want solutions to be set it and forget it, and that's completely understandable. Uh, but you have to do that carefully because you can't just say, "Oh, I have backup. I don't need to worry about it. I'm all set." You have to be able to test those restorations because not every backup provider can, well, not just the backup provider, but not every organization like Spin that offers backup has the SLAs that we do, which is a 99.9% recovery and accuracy of restoring that data. So it's great you have backup. Great, you've made that first step. The next part is to, be able to audit that process and procedure and see if you're actually able to get that data back that you're trying to restore. Where is that data living? Who's responsible for that data? At any point, are you responsible for that data as well? Or maybe you may be responsible for a certain layer of additional security. So great, you have backup, but to be able to test restoring specific data, you got to be able to see that data come back into your environment. And if you don't, that's a gap that you're, of course, going to want to have to fill sooner rather than later. Because, come the time where you're going to need it, at that point, it's too late. You're trying to restore 10 documents. Maybe you get 8 out of the 10. Well, where did the other 2 go, right? You've lost that. So
Mhm.
definitely taking a more proactive approach to not just be laissez-faire and say I've got backup. You should also be testing that restoration process to see the accuracy.
Yeah, and I think that gets at the heart of the challenge here. Like, we can have a laugh that we're not doing it and say we should be doing it, but it's like there's a reason we're not. It's too difficult, right? It's too difficult to like actually validate, or maybe the backup systems we created were too difficult. It doesn't have to be, right? Um, but the
Definitely not.
systems that we've put in place are not great.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if we can, again, I'm going to come back to Spin because we do backups, in an extremely user-friendly way. And as a solutions engineer, I appreciate the technology. I please appreciate the user interface. Our backups, let's say we're dealing with, Gmail or Google Drive. Well, what does the backup look like? It's a snapshot view of the live environment. However, that user has configured their live environment. When we run that backup, we take a snapshot of that and reflect it exactly the same way. So when it comes to navigating backups, it's almost as if you're in your own Gmail or Google Drive environment scrolling through. You see it exactly the same. You're able to identify parent folders, child folders, all the metadata, hierarchy, and structure being kept intact. And of course, being able to determine, do I want to restore the entire environment in as little as 2 clicks, but whether it be to myself or cross-restore it to any other user, or maybe I just want to restore a few specific items that I may have lost or can't find. You have that ability as well. So to your point, yes, the user interface of backups are extremely important because it's one thing to say that all your data is backed up. Well, try going and finding that data. How difficult is it to find the data that you are looking for, right? That's
Mhm.
something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I can say from personal experience, AWS, the Glacier storage tier, right, for S3 has been the go-to for archival data, right? And I don't know if anybody else has had to actually restore stuff out of Glacier, but oh man, it's a pain. First of all, when I was backing that up, I did not think about naming that in a way that I would know what was inside that archive, right? Can I just restore just 2 documents? No, right? Like that's a real pain. So now I have to restore tons of things. It takes days. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking about it now because I'm dealing with all the pain of it. Uh,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, you raised a great point, right? Only restore what you need to. Be able to identify very easily and with accuracy the data that you want to restore. Um, Especially when it comes, I mean, they exist. There are some backup providers that override data, and that's a nightmare, right? An end user, reaches out to the IT department. Hey, I accidentally deleted this one email. It has a very important, quote or POC document on it. I need it back. Well, sorry, we can't just restore that one email. We got to restore your entire environment. Well, then what happens? All this data is then, mix matched and tried to be fit in chronologically with their live data. And it's a nightmare to then sort through and be able to have an organized, I'll reference a Gmail environment. It's very difficult to have that. So if we can restore data accurately, know what we're restoring, be able to restore only specific items, but more than that, not override data and keep it organized within the live SaaS environment, that's huge. That's
Yeah,
very important.
yeah. All right, Jack. So we know we have to inventory our data. We know we got to do backups, right? What else do we have to do?
For your backups too, something that you need to be very well aware of is who has access to them. Are you properly securing them? Like Smiley mentioned, Glacier or S3, there's capabilities like object locks to make sure that the data can't be overwritten. Sure, you might end up, naming your files incorrectly, like Smiley mentioned, and you have to live with it for a year, but at least someone or something isn't able to go and overwrite or delete that data. So
Hmm.
just always thinking about for the SaaS system that you're using, is there that capability? How do I protect the data if there isn't something like an object lock? And in either case, think about least privilege access to that data. Smiley as a cloud administrator needs to be able to do a lot of things, but he doesn't need to be able to constantly read or overwrite or delete backups. So don't give him the permissions to do so until the time's necessary.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. I also think it's important for a backup provider to offer customizability, agility, and granularity in the type of permissions that these sub admins can perform, right? You're always going to have a super admin, you're always going to have a global admin, but generally in an IT team that has the ability to have extra IT members, somewhere in there, there's a couple sub admins. Well, you want to be able to justify the actions that they're performing, being that they have access to all the SaaS data for all of the users within this SaaS environment, right? So it shouldn't be, in my opinion, someone who just has, or an entire team who has broad access to everyone's data. I think it should be very granular and customizable, and a platform that's agile enough to, work with your organizational mentality of what is and is not a responsibility of this user. What access should they have to a specific OU or security group's data? So I think more than that, taking it a step further is the granularity of the permissions that are allotted to those subadmins.
Hmm. All right, Jack, I see education next. What are we thinking about here for education around ransomware?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when a ransomware attack happens, and to be clear, it's not always, it's through a user. So especially when we're using SaaS environments, people are connecting their workstations to entire Google Drives and things like that. There's not really least privilege access going on, and the impact of one user compromised can be massive.
Hmm.
So continuing just as any other part of information security, make sure users are well educated what's going on right now, what they can do to protect themselves. Don't click that link in the email, don't answer that phone call and let someone remote into your computer. That's still happening in enterprises.
Yeah. I
I
feel
got to jump
like,
in. Oh, sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. 100%. At a certain point, the three of us, right? We're trained in cybersecurity. We've made this our career. We've made this something that we're passionate about to learn and study and stay up to date, right? Something that is innate to our roles is the hunger and ability to continue learning within cybersecurity. Do you expect that of the accounting team? Do you expect that of the, marketing team or the, whatever it may be? That's not their job, right? That's not what they're in their specific career to do, is to learn best practices and how to look out for, no pun intended, but fishy things, right? So it is the responsibility of the IT team, individuals like the three of us, to be able to give them the tools and the knowledge, arm them with the knowledge that they need to be more secure, not just for themselves in their everyday life, but also with the organization security in mind as well.
Yeah, great point. I've also seen in some cases that, the first person to notice odd behavior was some staff member who didn't necessarily know what it was, right? And it was like during that time, the ransomware actor was continuing with the attack, right? So it just, even if they knew what they were seeing, they could report it and mitigate some of the risk.
100%. I mean, I was guilty of that too. And I was maybe 17, 18 years old when I started in cybersecurity. I was at an organization and I got a text on my work phone actually, saying, "Hey, it's Joe, the CEO. I'm at the quarterly meeting, forgot the company credit card. Can you please go to marketing or sorry, the finance department and have them send me a screenshot of it?" And I'm like, well, first of all, Joe, the quarterly meetings are here in the HQ, so that doesn't make sense, right? So that was the first thing. And what did I do, right? I immediately went to the IT team and I said, hey, is this a test? Are you guys trying to see, who's vulnerable within our organization? They're like, oh no, like that's not us. That's something real. Just ignore it. But as an individual new to the cybersecurity industry, if I didn't speak up to my IT team and show them the proof that I have on my company device that, hey, this is something that's going on, how would they know either, right? So transparency, not just from the IT department perspective to their end users, but vice versa, their end users to feel empowered enough to go to their IT team and express when they see something suspicious. Maybe it's nothing, but hey, at least we've trained them to feel comfortable enough to go to the IT team and express these concerns.
Absolutely. Jack, what's the role of detection and response here?
Yeah, the biggest thing is the longer an attacker is able to exist in your environment and to perform their ransomware activities, the longer it's going to take for you to respond and to recover. Each additional gigabyte of data, it takes eons longer to recover. And frankly, they'll be able to affect more systems by pivoting throughout your environment. So just having a solution to detect that first instance of a file going dark or being encrypted and replaced is really powerful.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
100% agree there, especially because uh, there's a variety of ways to go about this, but automation is huge when it comes to detecting a ransomware attack. The sooner you can stop it, right, the better. Why? Because whatever is being compromised, it's that much less data that you now have to figure out a way to restore, assuming you don't have a streamlined restoration process. So if the sooner you can stop it, absolutely the most important, because to your point, maybe it's targeting, it's using a user as a vector to attack Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, the two biggest SaaS platforms that organizations use right now for communication and collaboration. But maybe then it pivots and it starts going after applications used by the accounting department, going after billing extensions and applications that have also sensitive data to, that's important to the company, of credit card information or, employee tax information. So it's not just about, well, what are they going after? Maybe it's Google Workspace, maybe it's Microsoft, but their goal is to compromise as much as possible. Why? Because it gives them more leverage. Now they have more of your SaaS data to work with. They've got you in a more of a difficult spot. But if you've stopped at an early enough stage where it's a nominal amount of data that you have to restore, it's far easier to recover from attack in that perspective than if many solutions and data were to be compromised.
Hmm. Jack, what's our
Um,
last fundamental here?
yeah, like we talked about around education, you can't blame users for everything, unfortunately, right? I know it might make your job easier sometimes. Um, Having a comprehensive framework to ensure you're fully understanding your threat landscape, fully understanding your environment, having something that's kind of guiding you along and giving you a backstop for why you're doing this very annoying backup inventory and testing your restorations and all that sort of stuff. Having a comprehensive framework like NIST or something that might better suit your personal needs just gives you a lot more control and reduce the risk around the things that isn't just a user clicking on a link. Other types of compromise, all the other vulnerabilities that are being commonly exploited, basic things like have your proper vulnerability management program and address all of those things that are publicly exposed. If you're not doing that, no amount of training your users is going to prevent you from being attacked with ransomware.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that we all tend to play to our strengths, and if we leave some gaps, and we're not pursuing comprehensive security, then like that's the area that we're going to get hit. So, all right, so we've talked about ransomware fundamentals, and we've already seen some pretty interesting points about how this applies to SaaS environments. Let's pivot to like specifically what is unique about ransomware in SaaS environments. Renier, what are you saying with that?
So ransomware in SaaS environments, they present some unique challenges and considerations compared to traditional on-prem systems, making them a tempting target for adversaries as ransomware tactics evolve. A couple points on this being that SaaS environments provide an expanded attack surface. So of course, attackers will target where the data is. And with most organizations utilizing a wide variety of SaaS applications like Google Workspace and Microsoft 365, this provides a largely expanded attack surface. Moreover, the accessibility of your SaaS environment from anywhere in the world with an internet connection, right? All I have to do is be in a Starbucks or anywhere where there's Wi-Fi, and somehow, some way I would have the ability to get into your SaaS environment. Another point to bring up is that SaaS environments promote collaboration and data sharing. While this is, the very essence of what makes our lives easier, our jobs simpler, and enhances communication, it also poses a very significant risk. For example, multiple users often share access to files and documents. And if one user's account is compromised, that ransomware can spread quickly and easily throughout the entire SaaS environment. Additionally, SaaS environments, and from what I've seen, they host a proliferation of integrations and third-party applications. So in your SaaS environment, users can, of course, install applications and extensions completely spontaneously. There's no predicting it whenever they feel like bringing one in, right? But if one of these integrations becomes compromised, it introduces a potentially disastrous vulnerability for your SaaS environment, being that it's offering a very convenient way for ransomware attacks to occur. One thing that I can, think of, a very recent attack, is Disney Corporation, right? You would think an organization of that size, that many end users, the funding that they have behind them for cybersecurity, you would think that a ransomware attack would be very, very unlikely to happen. However, they were utilizing Slack, and all it took was one integration in Slack for that breach to occur. So it's almost like the saying, the devil's in the detail. You could have as many on-prem devices, EDR solutions, firewalls, Fortinets, that's all great, right? But if an extension or application or an integration brought into your environment and your users have granted permissions to those integrations, if that's compromised, then via chain link ransomware, now that cyber criminal has access to your SaaS environment by way of the permissions your users have granted to those third-party extensions or applications and integrations.
Yeah. I mean, something you said earlier really stuck with me here, which was just talking about like the nature of the data that we put in SaaS environments, right? Like whether it's, Gmail, Drive, Slack, that kind of thing. My mind, when I think about critical data, goes to a traditional database, right? I'm thinking like a Postgres or like a SQL Server database that has all of my customer um backed info, for my application. And I don't necessarily think so much about all the things that we're extracting as reports and our internal payroll, or like all of that stuff that is in those SaaS environments that we're not normally thinking about when it comes to IT security.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you could have these solutions, you could have these tools that you utilize, and like you said, you generate reports, you pull information from those, but where do you store it? I mean, a lot of times people just store it on their desktop, which isn't necessarily the best, type of storing of data, but generally what they do is they upload it to their SaaS environment. They're on Google Workspace, they add it to their personal users Google Drive, or maybe they put it, if it's accounting information, they put it in the finance shared drive. But now at that point, it's part of your SaaS environment. So to your point, what are we doing to protect that data?
Mm-hmm. This is something that we have worked with when we've got customers looking to meet a particular regulatory compliance requirement, where we have to say, like, you're not allowed to pull that type of data into this other system. And that's something that people do without thinking about it, like all the time, right? They pull this in and just don't think about how that's crossed an important boundary, and now the traditional protections don't apply.
Absolutely. And that's again where I could see education fitting in to teach end users and to teach C-suite executives, lead by example. This is what we should be doing with this data. This is how we should not be extracting it. And, this is where we should be storing it or not storing it. Of course, if we can keep things under a single pane of glass and keep things consolidated, that's best for the organization of data. But then, of course, the security measures to ensure that that data is not accessible by entities that shouldn't be accessing it in the first place.
Yeah. So let's see. We covered a few things about what was unique about ransomware. I want to make sure we tried to cover everything we thought about. Inventorying, critical data spreading everywhere. That's it. Oh, here's another one. Backups in SaaS environments, they can be kind of quirky, can't they? Like the native built-in features. I mean, what are you seeing when it comes to what's available?
They can. There's to be fair, that is a very broad statement, but what I think applies to this conversation is the fact that I'm not going to name exactly who, but I think we can all understand the big providers that this would apply to. But in their contracts, in their service level of agreements, there's verbiage in there that says your responsibility, your data, your responsibility. So although they may back up your data, although they may host your data, when it comes to the security of that data, that's where the line is drawn. That's not really their responsibility. They don't see it as their responsibility. The onus is on you to take the proactive approach to finding security solutions, whether it be redundancy in your backups, having a third-party backup provider, and then of course, the security controls within your SaaS environment to harden and improve the security overall to protect that SaaS data.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And then another one that sticks out to me here is detection and response. Like, Jack and I are accustomed to trying to have very comprehensive detections across cloud environments. But once you get into, certain SaaS tools, you have very limited visibility to like alert on particular activities, and like teasing apart whether
Hmm.
something is a benign action or malicious, it becomes really difficult.
Absolutely. And there's different types of specific to ransomware. There's different types of detection, right? There's signature-based detection, there's behavior-based detection. Signature-based, you're limited to only known ransomware types. Well, of course, as anything, they're going to learn, they're going to adapt.
Yeah.
These are very smart entities that are doing these ransomware attacks. So focusing on a behavior-based detection is far more accurate in stopping an attack at an early stage because you're able to detect it so early on. So when it comes to how quirky they are, specifically of being able to maneuver and go around traditional forms of security, there are RDR solutions that will just detect. They'll just let you know, right? Generally, they focus on your backups. So if you have a backup on Monday, congratulations, Stephen. Hey, by the way, we did a backup of your data on Monday. Come Tuesday, here's your backup report. Successful backup. However, we found ransomware. But at that point, it's
Mm.
too late. They did nothing to stop the attack at an early stage. They did nothing to mitigate how much total data was compromised. And hypothetically, right, you possibly could have to restore all of that data, because what cyber criminal in the right mind is going to stop their own attack, right? They're going to try to compromise as much as possible. So that's something that I would keep in mind with RDR solutions. You really want to make sure that it's not, I mean, it's great to know that a ransomware attack is happening, but it's even better for you to proactively do something about it for me. Stop it at an early stage. Identify what files were compromised. And if you can, Spin can, and we'll get into that later, automatically identify those compromised files and restore them to my SaaS environment to recover it and make it seem like no attack ever happened before.
Yeah, great point. When it comes to trends in ransomware attacks, some things that I'm aware of are targeting particular industries, right? Like healthcare, or things that are like healthcare adjacent. I know we saw, a bunch of data leaks coming out of like plastic surgery places or like cosmetic surgery places, right? Where they had sensitive, photos. So there's like particular industries that are under attack for ransomware, and the ransomware demands keep getting higher and higher, right? Um,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, people keep paying those, and so they keep getting funded.
Correct. Correct. There's there's a variety of trends. There's a few that I'd like to bring up today, but to give you some background, on myself when it comes to ransomware specifically, this is something I'm very passionate about. When I was in high school, the IT director actually took me under his wing and started teaching me, information technology, security best practices. We had on-prem servers with duplications of our data. We actually experienced the ransomware attacks. The whole school was down. We couldn't do anything about it. That was, caused by one specific way, but that was the first part. Then in college, I'm, going, on campus, living on campus. I have United Healthcare because that's what the, college provided. They were then hit with a ransomware attack. So I've had these experiences and been able to see the different trends, to your point, of the different industries that they're attacking. Healthcare is huge. Education is huge. Why? Because you have, if you're in, a K through 8th school, you have very young individuals who are not knowledgeable of cybersecurity and the risk associated clicking a fishy link. Even high schoolers, and I hate to say it, but college students as well. So some of the trends that I'd like to touch on today when it comes to ransomware attacks in SaaS environments, the first one being that they target weakly secured administrator accounts, right? An administrator for your SaaS environment, their role is to handle the IT climate of your entire organization, right? With that role comes the responsibility of security for your SaaS data and for obviously your IT environment as a whole. Being that administrators overlook critical sections of your SaaS environment, in the absence of robust controls or authentication, such as multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, these admin accounts become vulnerable targets for ransomware attackers. And again, to stress the point, why? Because an admin user is not the same as an end user. An end user, they have limited permission. They can't do what an admin user can do. Well, then why is that enticing to that of a ransomware attacker? Because they get to use those permissions that have been granted to those admin users for their benefit to compromise more and more data. So there's the point that I'd like to touch on there. A second one being evading detection. Now, this is nothing new to the cybersecurity industry. We've seen this type of trend before, but now it's really emerging with these persistent type of threats. And this is where attackers are increasingly adopting a low and slow method of gaining a foothold within an enterprise without you knowing it, then slowly spreading throughout the environment, right? This approach really just aims to evade traditional detection methods by encrypting a small percentage of files or even targeted files, which makes the detection very, very challenging. The third trend that I would see here is targeting mobile devices, and I might have to adjust myself in my seat here because this is something I'm extremely passionate about. I have several colleagues that we all believe the same thing, and that is that mobile devices become an extension of your SaaS environment. This again notes our previous topic before, the expanded attack surface that could affect the data stored on the devices as well as the SaaS environment at large. So being that we're talking about an expanded attack surface, this not only encompasses potential vulnerabilities within SaaS environments, but also encompasses the data stored on these mobile devices. So as these devices interact with your SaaS environment, they introduce additional entry points for potential threats, underscoring the importance of implementing robust security measures across both the SaaS platform and associated mobile devices to mitigate risk comprehensively. There's been an organization that I've worked for. They give me a company laptop. They give me a cell phone as well. But I don't really see that being a huge trend in organizations. That's also kind of expensive to give every user a mobile device. But what ends up happening then, right? As an employee, I'm going to use my personal cell phone. I might use my backup personal cell phone. I'm going to install OneDrive for iOS. I'm going to install Google Drive for Android, and I'm going to sign in with my domain login credentials. Do you, as the organization, have any control over that? No, it's my personal device. Do you have any visibility into what I'm doing with that personal device? No, you don't. What if I am a victim of a phishing link email attack, and I've clicked on that phishing link and now it's compromising my device? Very quickly, that cyber criminal is going to be able to see that not only do they have access to my device, but I've also gone ahead and signed into my SaaS applications for my organization with my domain login credentials.
Yeah, I think that's just a fact of modern life now, right? Like I have to be signed into that so that I can do my work on the go, but I'm not really interested in, as an employer, giving everybody an extra phone. And I don't want to carry around an extra phone. I mean, some people do, but
Hmm.
not everybody.
I could.
That
Oh,
brings up a good point. So I did want to share with our audience today, you know, a view into just what does a ransomware attack look like, right? Like as a broad chain. And although there's much more detailed attack chains out there, for the most part, this is what we're seeing, right? So we're seeing some initial access, intermediate tactics, and then impact, right? And along the way, we want to have some amount of prevention and detection for all of these techniques and tactics as much as possible. So the initial access is going to look usually like some sort of valid account, just like Renier was saying, right? My workstation's compromised, or my phone gets some sort of compromise. There's a malicious attachment or link, but something that's on my device. It might also be that I've exposed credentials somewhere, right? Like I've put them in a source
hmm.
control repository, or any other amount. There's a lot of different ways that I can expose credentials accidentally. Um, the more advanced techniques may not apply to everybody, but if you're a valuable target, password sprays are out there where they're going to take a whole list of exposed passwords and try them against your admin's usernames, or even SIM swaps to bypass MFA, right? We do like to hammer home that MFA is important, but if you are a high value target, someone is going to try to SIM swap you and take ownership of your SMS and um and bypass that MFA. So just locking down valid accounts usually isn't enough, right? Like this is probably bound to happen. Um, Less and less we're seeing trusted relationships be abused, but it's still out there, right? Um, Resellers or delegated administrators, or some other trust relationship um, can provide access into your environment. But then once they get in, they're going to conduct some of these intermediate tactics in varying order, right? So they're going to look around and perform discovery. Like, where can I find the most valuable data? Where can I pivot? How can I escalate my privileges? How can I gain persistence? And then ultimately, like, how can I exfiltrate some valuable data if that's what I'm looking to do? Um, and how can I deny other admins the ability to stop me? Right. That's one of the other trends that we're seeing, is trying to maintain their persistence by blocking out other admins. And then ultimately overwriting data, destroying backups, right? Overwriting data so that it gets put into those backups, so that my backups are now corrupted. But ultimately, this is what the chain's going to look like. So, Renier, can you take us through a more specific example, understanding that broad attack chain?
Of course. So, the image that we're all seeing here, this is a very common infiltration method, which is phishing emails. So in this example, let's say a user receives a phishing email, they click on it, right? A phishing link. They click on the link, now they're compromised. They are being used as a vector for the ransomware attack. So now that the ransomware virus is active, it can automatically spread to the computer. At which point, all the files on the computer are completely, of course, encrypted, as well as items within their Google Drive. Well, how could that be? Well, using Google Drive as an example, many users will have active file sync from their end device to Google G Suite Cloud. I mean, how often do we create something? It's on our document, it's on our desktop, and we want to upload it to our SaaS environment, so we drag and drop it to Google Drive, right? It's a very effective and convenient way to store data in our SaaS environment. But In that case, that type of synchronization can actually work against the user, being that it's now spreading the ransomware attack quickly and replacing the files within Google Drive with their infected version.
Hmm. I mean,
So,
that's super scary how easily that can happen. And I'm trying to think as a security professional, where along the way I would be able to detect that, right? Like we could do some endpoint detection, but if that doesn't happen, those next few steps are going to be pretty transparent to me. Or like I'm not going to be able to see. Yeah.
100%, and that's why, like we say, the automation behind the solution has to be very, very effective, right? Because we have to be able to detect it at such an early stage. Where Spin fits in this scenario is that when we start seeing it going after your domain, right? Like I said earlier, you could have, one cell phone, two cell phones, an iPad, a Mac. On the Spin side, our solution is domain-based. We're completely API-based and agentless. So what that means is we're not limited to just devices. Anytime a user is logging in with their domain login credentials, creating a connection to something with your SaaS environment, we're able to acknowledge that. In this scenario, being, let's say, Google Drive, for example, downloaded on a desktop, like we said, the laptop's been compromised already. The second it starts going after Google Drive, which is, of course, tied to your domain, that's when we're going to start detecting it. That's when we're going to see that there's a ransomware attack happening utilizing our behavior-based detection. And in that scenario, let's say we have Google Drive for desktop and that user, we're going to sever the connection between the user and Google Drive for desktop. That is what allows us to stop the attack at such an early stage. The next part to that on the Spin side is utilizing our algorithms on identifying exactly which items have been compromised. Therefore, we can utilize our backups solution that's in place to automatically restore the compromised data very quickly, very effectively. I know you can see it kind of down at the bottom of the screen here. We'll get into this shortly, but there are a few values of Spin's RDR solution that no other provider on the market can offer, especially when it comes to the monitoring, detecting, stopping, and recovering attributes for an RDR solution to do.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're doing some pretty advanced work there. um, why are backups not enough, right? Like, if I've got my normal backups, like, why do I need all that extra stuff?
I think once again, I have to adjust my seat for this. So this is I'm happy to have an audience where I can discuss this because I hear it too often, and sometimes it's not everyone's fault, but yeah, I'll say it. The old mentality of ransomware protection is backups, right? It used to be that if you have backups, you have ransomware protection. You get hit with a ransomware attack, okay, go ahead and identify what was compromised and use your backup to restore that data. That's the first problem. Good luck identifying exactly the extent of that ransomware attack, exactly what files were compromised from that attack, and being able to sift through all of your backups somehow and restore only that data. So backups in of itself, the issue being that there's API limitations, right, by your provider themselves. That's what will cause, or I should say better, is what will impede the restoration of your SaaS data to your environment, causing so much downtime. So a statistic I'd like to bring up being that 92% of businesses report having backups, but more than 1 in 4 of those businesses fail to restore data from those backups during a ransomware attack. So this emphasizes the need to regularly test not just your backup process, but also your restoration process. Despite having backup protocols in place, it's crucial to consider, like I was saying before, that data restoration takes time, and API limitations from your provider impede that recovery time even further. So with a solution like Spin's RDR solution, being that we're monitoring, detecting, stopping, and recovering 24/7, all on your live environment, not just utilizing your backups, but focusing your live environment, having baselines on every Spin account, which of course are relative, and using behavior-based detection, when we do determine that ransomware attack, cut it off at an early stage and utilize the backups, being that the backups are really the reactive side to a ransomware attack. They're not a proactive approach. A proactive approach is something like Spin RDR, identifying it, stopping it, and then using the backups to help restore that data. So that's why, in my opinion, that's why overall backups are not enough because
Hmm.
you're going to experience the industry average downtime being 21 to 30 days. And when I'm talking with my prospects as a solutions engineer, I always ask them, what would you do if you didn't have access to your SaaS data for 30 days? What would happen to your organization? The response is always, oh, it'd be detrimental. Oh, we wouldn't be able to work. We'd lose customers. We'd lose business. We'd lose clients. We'd be, no, the lights would have to be turned off. We wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
work, right? So that's why when you have a solution like RDR that is a more proactive approach, that's what complements your backups. Your backups are not ransomware protection, the reactive side. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. And so, so so Spin is doing similar capability to backups, right? In addition to all the other stuff that it's doing. So then what does that recovery process look like? And how is that different from just a recovery from backup?
Uh, yeah, great question. I don't want to be redundant here, but if you just had backups again, first of all, you have to have some kind of solution to know that there's a ransomware attack. Or after the fact, you're just going to try to click
Yeah.
into a file and you're not going to be able to access it, right? Some very common ways is they'll change the formats of files so it's unable to be opened. Or if you can open it, all the data has been changed to something illegible. Or they've just wiped all your data and now they're holding it hostage. It's non-existent. You open up your Google Drive and it's not there anymore. So with utilizing backups and an RDR solution, if you didn't have an RDR solution, all you would really be doing is seeing what was compromised, figuring out a way somehow to identify what was
I see what you
compromised,
mean. Yeah.
then utilizing the backups themselves and trying to restore it
So
manually.
it all goes together, right? Like,
Correct.
yeah, that makes sense. Um,
And two, that backup might be a 5 terabyte file out in the cloud somewhere, or on a tape at a offsite provider that you have to go have them bring it to you in a van. The amount of time alone just in lost productivity is for your security staff and all the users and people who are relying on that data.
mhm. I mean, I've known some organizations that like they just don't even want to go through with that. They might even just like accept some loss or whatever, right? Because that recovery is so cumbersome.
Hmm.
So okay, so we've talked about a lot of the problems. Broadly, like what are we seeing as proven strategies to defend from SaaS ransomware?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. A few that I'd like to touch on. The first one being collaborating with your SaaS provider, ensuring you have a complete understanding of the native security features that your SaaS provider offers. But more than that, it's also critical to understand where their responsibility ends and where yours begins. Due to the shared responsibility model, you are most likely going to be at a certain level responsible for an extra layer of security for your backups themselves. Additionally, I would say develop an incident response plan. Ensure that all the key players within this incident response plan know what their responsibilities are, make sure that they can execute their responsibilities, and then of course automation simply complements that to assist where needed. But furthermore, most importantly, regularly test these incident response plans
Mm.
to ensure both of these processes are current and effective.
Mm. I see a question coming through here, Jack. I think this is well suited for you. If you've got data in the SaaS and your backup is encrypted at rest, are you less likely to be a victim of ransomware? Like, has encryption at rest helped you?
Yeah, I mean, if the data is in your SaaS provider and it's encrypted at rest, that's from their perspective, right? That's not going to be likely a key that you control.
Right.
Uh, as a person interacting with that data, right? It's going to be transparent to you. So if that data is compromised, it's deleted or replaced with something that's encrypted by a key that the attacker owns. That's not going to do you any favors.
Yeah, I feel like this is a common kind of misconception. It's like understanding what does encryption help us do, right? It certainly helps if somebody were to walk in to that SaaS provider's data center and take the disk off the rack and like walk away with it. Like they
Mhm.
won't be able to decrypt it. So that's helpful, but I don't know how much that's happening, right?
It's really not.
I
I got to
s-
jump in there. Speaking as a former data center engineer, security is of the utmost importance there. So that's really not a frequent way for loss of data or ransomware. Really, that ransomware attack, what it does is, again, it uses a user as a vector for the ransomware attack. And so what they're seeing is not the encrypted version. They're seeing the live SaaS environment data. They're not seeing data that's encrypted in transit, at rest, whatever it may be. They're seeing it plain as day, like a normal employee within your organization, however they would see it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That kind of demystifies what that encryption's really doing for us.
Mhm.
We're getting low on time here. Renier, is there anything else you'd like to share with us about Spin1 and the platform?
Absolutely. I'll keep this high level, short, and to the point. So Spin1 is an all-in-one SaaS security platform, right? We provide users with the ability to have 3-time-a-day daily backups for fast, easy, and accurate restoration of their data. We have automated AI detection and response to finding the impacted files and restoring these to the users quickly, which of course drastically reduces downtime. In addition to that, automated monitoring of configurations and integrations within your SaaS environment. This has to do with our SSPM solution, where we've taken a two-prong approach addressing internal and external vulnerabilities. Additionally, automated customizable alerts for any detected risks, whether it be on the extension application side, whether it be on the sharing of sensitive data or sharing of data to anyone with a link, but specifically to ransomware, being able to have a variety of avenues to be alerted when an attack begins, when Spin stops the attack, when Spin begins the recovery of the data, and when Spin completes the recovery of the data. And this is the point that I want to hone in on, the value that Spin offers that no other provider on the market can do, which is the ability to stop an active ransomware attack at such an early stage, identify the files that were compromised, and restore your entire environment after a ransomware attack as if nothing ever happened within a guaranteed 2-hour SLA. In other words, right? Max time of downtime, 2 hours, if not less.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I mean, it's just so much more than what we're getting natively with these providers. And I think that this provides a lot of value, especially if you know you're getting your critical data into these other systems, and
Mhm.
not doing other protections around it, which I think is
Right.
probably a lot more common than people realize.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more there.
Quick
Look,
question for you, Renier. Like a lot of, backup solutions, it's going to be talking about compressing your data, putting it on a disk, putting it somewhere, or putting it in blob storage somewhere in the cloud, right? How does Spin handle different compliance requirements? Things like GDPR, where you're a large enterprise that has people all over the globe, but all of your employees in the EU need to keep all of their data in the EU. How do you handle that?
Mhm. Absolutely. A great question. We have customers in a variety of verticals, industry-wide or industry-wise around the world. They do have things like GDPR compliance. So on the backup side, we have partnered with Azure, AWS, and GCP as the storage providers. We handle all the procurement of the buckets. There's nothing that a customer has to do. After they purchase Spin, they don't have to dial up and say, "Hey, I need a few buckets," whatever it may be. We handle all that for them, and to make it customizable, granular, and agile on the backup side, within those 3 storage providers, Spin offers 4 regions for you to choose where you would like your physical data to be stored. You can do that as an entire OU basis. You could differentiate OUs, maybe management team there in Europe, GDPR compliance data created in Europe has to stay in Europe. You could choose that as a storage location for that OU, maybe marketing their stateside. You want to store it, with GCP in Iowa, you can do that as well. So it's very customizable for our customers that have those certain regulations that they need to abide by.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we're seeing more and more pressure to have a powerful tool do that and not just have the basic configurations in place.
Of course, and it's taking the manual work out of it. Like I said, we're doing 3-time-a-day daily backups of your SaaS environment. For Google Workspace, we're doing Gmail, Google Drive, contacts, calendars. Same thing with 365. We're also offering backup for Salesforce and Slack. That is also something that's an increasing request that we're seeing, is wanting to expand the surface of what it is that we're backing up and have a copy of not just our core SaaS applications like Google Workspace and Microsoft, but also these other applications that we use for collaboration and daily communication.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. Renier, thank you so much for joining us today, letting us pick your brain, challenge you on some of these things. And Jack, thanks for bringing your expertise. This has been pretty informative for me, and I hope our audience has enjoyed it as well.
Thank you both. This has
Thank
been
you.
a great time with all of you.